In some of China's largest cities, a high-tech effort is underway to bust low-level offenders, jaywalkers. Cameras record them going through intersections, zero in on their face, and then publicly shame them on nearby video screens. It's all part of the Chinese government's new social credit system, where people's daily behavior is monitored and rated. I think it's a good thing, this woman said. It makes people more honest. But this social credit rating goes far beyond a traditional credit score, which is based on your finances. China's version factors in everything from jaywalking to smoking on trains to buying too many video games. If your score gets too low, you can be banned from buying plane tickets, renting a house, or getting a loan. Nearly 15 million people have already been prevented from traveling. Journalist Leo Hu is one of them. He recently tried to book a flight but was told he couldn't because he was on the list of untrustworthy people. I can't buy property. My child can't go to private school, he says. You feel like you're being controlled by the list all the time.
It can recognize more than 4,000 vehicles.
Chinese technology firms such as SenseTime are helping the government effort by developing advanced cameras that use artificial intelligence to track just about everything. This knows every person, every bike, every car, every bus that goes through the frame.
You can tell whether it is an adult, a child, a male or female.
Police in Beijing have been wearing these glasses that can recognize faces linked to the government's national database to help boost arrests. How advanced is this technology?
This is cutting edge.
Wu Fei is CEO of a company that makes the glasses. He claims he doesn't know how the government intends to use his technology.
I have no idea.
Really?
Yes.
Do you trust the government the way they're using your technology?
Sorry, I can't answer this.
You can't answer that.
This is outside our scope of questions.
The fear, of course, is that the government may use this social credit scoring system to punish people that it deems not sufficiently loyal to the Communist Party. And trying to clear your name or fight your score is nearly impossible because there is no real due process.
He's rich and powerful. Why shouldn't he have the authority to spy on all of us from his ivory Microsoft tower? The Daily Mail reports Microsoft's Bill Gates is backing a startup that will provide live and unfiltered high-definition footage of every inch of Earth. The startup, Earth Now, plans to launch 500 satellites to cover Earth's atmosphere in Big Brother real-time video surveillance. Sounds reasonable, right? Humanity wasn't using its privacy anyway. As Gizmodo reports, the company's goal is to make money selling its service to government and enterprise clients, and that's kind of terrifying. Sure, governments have their own individual satellite operations, but the scale of what Earth Now is promising is jaw-dropping. Who better to calm worries and work through regulatory hurdles than the world's most prolific philanthropist? He wouldn't do anything immoral with that tech.
In recent years, the digital video monopoly YouTube, which is part of the digital search monopoly Google, has been accused of trying to silence conservative viewpoints. PragerU and other innocuous center-right content providers have found themselves censored on YouTube. YouTube denies doing any of this on purpose. It was accidental, they say. We have no political agenda. Well, it turns out that's a lie. This show has exclusively obtained an internal YouTube memo from April of 2017, last year, that lays out in detail how YouTube censors videos. One of the reasons the extent of YouTube censorship isn't obvious to most people is because the company is smart enough not to scrub every video it wants to censor. Instead, many videos wind up in what the memo describes as limited state. Sounds like something out of Scientology. Videos in limited state are intentionally pushed down on the site, so they're harder to find. So what are the criteria for censoring videos on YouTube? Well, according to the memo, quote, controversial religious or supremacist content qualifies. So does, quote, highly controversial inflammatory content. What exactly does any of that mean? None of it is defined. It's totally subjective. YouTube makes the call and does so with maximum political intent. For example, YouTube decided it was inflammatory for PragerU to question the notion that all cops are racist. If you don't think they are, you're in trouble, according to YouTube. So PragerU's video was demonetized and effectively declared hate speech. Yet videos that suggest that, I don't know, white people are inherently evil remain on YouTube without any restrictions. That's clearly political. The memo makes it very clear where YouTube censors are coming from. It explains that the company is committed to, quote, the freedom to belong, including the resulting benefits of diversity and inclusion. Okay, sounds good. But what exactly does that mean? Again, it's entirely subjective and intentionally so. At one point, the memo declares that any, quote, demeaning language against a protected group may result in a video being removed from the site. So who are these protected groups? Well, according to YouTube, refugees are a protected group. So let's say you don't like the fact that refugees are being resettled in your neighborhood, for example. You've assumed it was your right as a citizen to disagree with government policy. Nope. Not according to YouTube. They will censor your complaints about what your government is doing and call you a bigot in the process if you don't like refugee resettlement policy, for example. Well, it's not surprising that one of the trusted flaggers YouTube has deputized to censor extremist content is the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is itself, irony of ironies, an extremist group. The SPLC has a long history of inciting hatred and division for political ends. It was the SPLC that slandered the Family Research Council as, quote, a hate group and labeled the Pulse nightclub shooting a right-wing attack, which, as you know, it was not. The SPLC is totally discredited, and anyone who spends 5 minutes reading about it comes to that conclusion. And yet YouTube trusts the Southern Poverty Law Center to censor your videos, and that tells you a lot. We contacted YouTube for a statement on all of this, and we asked whether the company had revised its policies since the memo was written last year. The company barely responded. A Flack linked us to a blog post written by a Google lawyer last June in which he vowed that the company would be more aggressive in censoring videos it doesn't like. It's worth noting that almost nobody in power is fighting back against this censorship. Here you have an American company incubated in America by Americans under the protection of American law and courts, which is now working to undermine the most sacred of American rights, which is the freedom of expression. Yet the Congress, which is run, by the way, by Republicans right now, is doing precisely nothing about this. When you ask them, they mumble something unintelligible about free markets and get back to designing another tax cut for companies like YouTube. Meanwhile, the rest of us who live here, the ones who still care about free speech, are left to fend for ourselves. The big digital monopolies demand that we conform to their worldview, and they shut us down when we dissent. They have too much power. They are a threat to this country. It is time to complain while we still can.
Aadhaar, which means foundation, is a 12-digit unique identity number for every Indian citizen. A unique number is assigned to each citizen when their biometric data is scanned and entered into the national database. Aadhaar is the largest and most sophisticated biometric identification system in the world. All 1.2 billion Indians will be scanned and assigned a number, and the project is almost completed. It is mandatory that bank accounts in India be linked to Aadhaar. In addition to banking services, all government services are linked to Aadhaar too. When the system is finished, it will be impossible to buy and sell in India without participation in Aadhaar. Prime Minister Modi, a radical Hindu, is pushing hard for India to become the first cashless society on the planet. In 2016, Mr. Modi's Hindu government banned 85% of India's currency in circulation in a brazen attempt to compel people to accept a cashless society. Imagine here in America, the United States government suddenly banning all paper money and coins except quarters and $1 bills. With almost every citizen scanned into the database, Aadhaar is only the beginning in India. New Delhi also introduced in 2016 a digitized system called India Stack. It is a set of APIs that allow government agencies, corporations, and developers to utilize the Aadhaar ID infrastructure to propel India toward becoming a paperless and cashless society. India Stack enables citizens to store and share personal data, such as addresses, telephone numbers, bank statements, financial records, tax records, and employment records. The personal records can be accessed and shared with others via Aadhaar. Therefore, Indian citizens can use India Stack to open bank accounts and brokerage accounts, make investments, share personal records with anybody in India by simply scanning their finger on their phone. Although there has been little opposition to Aadhaar among India's non-Christian population, many Bible-believing disciples of Jesus Christ in India are outright alarmed by the government's insistence that they be scanned and given a number so that they may buy and sell.
In 2008, the Indian government announced the launch of an identity card drive and promised that within a decade, every citizen would be provided with a unique ID number. That number in question was linked to an individual's biometric data, fingerprints and iris scans, and over 1 billion Indians have now received their cards. But today the government...
Launched in 2008, Aadhaar aims to provide an identification number to each of India's 1.3 billion people. It also records every individual's fingerprints and iris scans for the government's massive database.
Okay, now put the fingers of your right hand.
In a country where many people don't have any identity document, this is a revolution.
I want to enroll my 3-year-old daughter in school. They told me I can't do it without my Aadhaar card, so I desperately need it.
The government has now made Aadhaar mandatory for availing subsidies on food and fuel, for opening bank accounts, and for getting a mobile phone connection.
How many people are using biometric payments today in India?
It would be in the millions. Today, the Aadhaar authentication, which is an online verification using the Aadhaar biometric, does about 15 to 20 million a day.
The new machine is a part of the government's rollout of its digital identification program, Aadhaar. It took India's government 7 years to enroll almost 90% of the country's 1.2 billion people. That's because it had to collect the world's largest biometric dataset, including prints of 11 billion fingers and photos of more than 2 billion eyes.
100 करोड़ से ज़्यादा लोगों को आधार नंबर मिल चुका है.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is betting on advanced technology to help solve India's critical problems, like poverty and corruption. But the new technology has brought its own set of problems for some.
90% of the cash in India is either 500 or 1,000 rupee notes. Suddenly, they are now worthless.
Now I'm carrying all this cash, but I can't have lunch. Nobody's accepting this money. This is the real reality.
Because Big Brother is not watching you in a room through a television, but is watching through the biometric system and through Aadhaar and through data. Every single thing you do, where you go, when you buy a ticket, when you buy a gas for your cooking, when you are going to the bank, when you do a bank transaction, your calls are all monitored. So what is left? So it's a complete invasion of
the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one world government. And the whole agenda is to create a one world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is getting me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what
everything,
you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people. And you become a slave. You become a serf to these people. That's their goal. That's their intentions.
And you've probably heard the saying, cash is king. Well, that idea seems to be dying as plastic rises as the preferred choice for many. In fact, a new survey north of the border says half of Canadian populations are ready to get rid of cash altogether. RT's Alex Mihailovich joins us with the story from Toronto. Alex, what does this poll tell us about the future of the paper stuff in Canada?
Well, it's an interesting poll just when you look at the numbers that are coming out. We're looking at about 50% of Canadians saying we don't need cash anymore. They're ready to go electronic, be it, as you mentioned, plastic or be it online banking. Whatever it is, the money that we like to touch and feel is no longer in the equation for half of Canadians. When it comes to checks, 2/3 of Canadians want to get rid of checks altogether. 48% are saying, you know what, they're willing to just look at this and to for the convenience. So, you know, it's basically you don't have cash in your hand, which is a nice thing, but 48% say the convenience is really what is playing a big part.
This isn't just a Canadian thing, though. We're seeing it other places. Germans love their cash. There's a lot of places where this is spreading. What do we got for that?
Yeah, you know, this is a global thing, and we have a list here which is pretty impressive. This is from 2013, and the reason we have a 2013 list, it gives you a good idea of just how much things have changed, because I'll give you some other numbers which are pretty shocking just in the past 4 years when you're looking at it. So back in 2013, Singapore really was the leader. It has serious ambitions to this day to go completely cashless. And a lot of stores have a sorry no cash policy in Singapore, which is pretty impressive when you're there. Now, basically, you can't buy things unless you have a card or another way to pay, let's say Apple Pay or something along those lines. Number 2, Netherlands at 60%. We're looking at that's how much cashless transactions go on. France, 59%. Sweden, 2013, it was 59%. Now, you got to think, Sweden historically was the first country in Europe to have cash back in 1661. Now, this year, 98% of payments go through non-cash methods. That means only 2% are cash methods in Sweden. So Sweden is number 1 at this point. Canada, 57% back in 2013. Belgium, 56%. And in Belgium right now, it's illegal to buy real estate with cash or make any purchases over 3,000 euros in cash unless it's something used. So that's a biggie. United Kingdom, USA, 45%. Obviously, the States is a little bit behind here. But you know what? You're looking at this list. Australia is a huge one. Citibank is not even having bank machines anymore. They want to go completely cashless in there. But there's other countries. Ecuador, Kenyans, 59% of Kenyans don't pay with cash, as well as South Korea. They want to go and become a nation that has something along the lines of Bitcoin by 2020, another cashless nation in the making. So as we go down the line, you know, these things are changing, and it will eventually hit Canada and the States somewhere down the line, it looks like, at least.
Well, Bitcoin's price has been on a wild ride. 2017 alone saw massive gains, starting the year at under $1,000 and at its peak breaking $19,000. As Bitcoin's popularity surges and its price rises and falls, more and more people are asking the same question. How does Bitcoin, something that's essentially invisible and intangible, have value? That answer starts with basic economics. In econ, one easy way to think about value is like this. Something has value if it checks the following 2 boxes: scarcity and utility. Scarcity just means that the supply is finite. And in the case of Bitcoin, there's actually a set cap on the number of Bitcoins that can ever exist, 21 million. Ben Yu, a blockchain expert living in San Francisco, says this set cap makes it more desirable than other assets, even gold.
We can have things like the California gold rush, where people find an enormous supply of gold just by accident somewhere, and that can dramatically increase the supply over time.
And so it begins, the great gold rush to California.
Or technological increases make it far easier for us to mine gold. So we actually see that today. We mine gold at 4 times the rate that we did just 100 years ago.
So if Bitcoin checks the box for scarcity, what about its utility? Bitcoin's utility lies in its potential to be a more efficient currency or commodity than we already have. Proponents say it's useful for a number of reasons. First, Bitcoin's decentralized, meaning no bank, government, or single person has control over it. It can't be toppled by corruption at the top. Another use of Bitcoin is that it's trivially divisible, meaning you can buy a donut with it as easily as you can buy a house or even a mansion.
Gold is very difficult to use transactionally. You can't go to the store and shave off some gold shavings to pay for your cup of coffee or buy a car with it.
And third, the code it's built on is open source, meaning it's available for anyone to look at, scrutinize, and even modify. But as you may have noticed, none of those uses are intrinsic, and that's a point Bitcoin skeptics love to make.
It has no intrinsic value.
The idea that it has some huge intrinsic value is just a joke.
It is not a rational currency in that sense.
But here's the thing, other assets and currencies that we trust, like gold and paper money, don't have that much intrinsic value either. Take dollar bills. According to the Federal Reserve, it costs about 12 cents to create a $20 bill. So the rest of that $20, the remaining $19.88, comes from the trust people place in it.
And that's actually exactly the same with Bitcoin. Fiat currencies and Bitcoin and almost any other form of money is just based on the trust that people place in it.
Tom Lee says that Bitcoin is no different from Facebook or Google.
If you ask a baby boomer, can you justify the value of anything that's a digital business, they probably don't accept that Facebook, Google, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, these are the largest companies in the S&P 500, and they're primarily digital businesses built almost purely on digital trust.
So if we agree Bitcoin has some value, at least for some people, then how much could a single Bitcoin actually be worth? We see people on TV making predictions all the time.
I wouldn't be surprised to see a six-figure headline.
The end game on Bitcoin is that it will hit $300,000 to $400,000.
But how are they actually getting these numbers? A lot of them do it by comparing Bitcoin to gold, because they perceive those two assets as being most similar to each other. The total value for all the gold ever mined in the world is about $7.5 trillion. So if Bitcoin were to replace gold completely, then each Bitcoin would be worth $357,000. It's simple math. The total value of gold divided by the total number of Bitcoins equals the potential value of each Bitcoin. Or if you want to be more realistic, just take a portion of it.
If Bitcoin just captures 5% of the total market for alternative currencies today, which is predominantly gold, Bitcoin's worth $25,000 per coin.
And here's another theory analysts use to price Bitcoin, Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe, an electrical engineer, proved that the value of a social network or telecom company is proportional to its number of users squared. A good way to think about it is like this. A single telephone is useless, but the value of telephones increases exponentially as others get phones. Metcalfe's law holds for Facebook using 10 years of data. And Tom Lee says it holds for Bitcoin.
Since 2013, 94% of the value of Bitcoin's been explained by just those two variables.
Ultimately, Bitcoin's price will depend on the demand for it. If people believe in it and continue to buy it more than they sell it, then the price will rise. And conversely, if Bitcoin is sold more than it's bought, the price will fall. Many people think that Bitcoin is a bubble, and that's predicated on the concept that Bitcoin has no value. But there's reason to believe that that isn't true. By definition, Bitcoin is scarce. And the crypto may have utility as a superior way to store and exchange wealth.
China accounted for 90% of Bitcoin trade just 1 year ago. But with Beijing banning initial coin offerings, or ICOs, and regulators shutting down Bitcoin exchanges there, Japan is setting out on a different path, embracing the crypto movement.
Bitcoin trade here in Japan accounts for nearly half the global trade volume. Compare that to 25% in the US. The number has surged since the government passed a new law earlier this year recognizing the digital currency as a legal form of payment.
That law encouraged some big retailers here to partner with Bitcoin exchanges and begin accepting the digital currency. There's already more than 4,500 stores that let you pay with Bitcoin here, and the Nikkei says that number could increase 5-fold by the end of the year.
So Doug, what do you actually see happening with the dollar?
My thought is this, that understanding that the dollar is as unstable as it is, at this point, the Fed might try to create an alternative, and an alternative that's more under their control, than the dollar and actually out of the traditional banking system. What would happen if the Federal Reserve created a look-alike dollar? Let's call it the Fed coin. Perhaps based on the same technology that Bitcoin is based on. This is the blockchain technology where every transaction can be tracked from the creation of the Bitcoin itself. I suspect the next stage on the part of the government, since they've tried quantitative easing, can't do that too much more after creating trillions and trillions of these paper dollars, which are going to come out of the financial system and into the retail system, exploding prices. Zero interest rates, negative interest rates, huge distortions. That's going to come to an end. What are they going to do next when as we enter the trailing edge of the hurricane and everybody will say, do something, do something? Well, what can they do? They've used their two major tools so far. My guess is they're going to come up with a completely digital currency called the Fed coin, which will actually act as a parallel alternative to the dollar. It'll have a lot of advantages from the government's point of view. And as much as people seem to like Bitcoin, the public may accept it to start with.
So Doug, tell me about this Fed coin. What's it going to look like? Is it going to replace the dollar?
Well, this is a conjecture on my part. It's not going to be physical to start with. It's not going to be paper in any way. It's going to be something that you're going to have on your smartphone. In Canada, they have something called Project Jasper, which is their own version of this. The Chinese have announced that they're planning on a blockchain type currency. The same thing. They've said that they want to see this happen as soon as possible. The British have made an announcement along these lines. Look, the thing to remember is that cash is on its way out, not just in the United States, but all over the world. In Sweden, it's almost a cashless economy. In France, in Italy, in Spain, it's illegal to transact for more than 1,000 or 2,000 euros of cash. The euro, the 500 euro note is being phased out. The reason for this is that if the banks are untrustworthy and interest rates are zero or negative, why leave your money in a bank? It costs you less to put it under your mattress, actually. So, but they don't want people to have cash. Why? Because they say a cash economy facilitates tax evasion. It facilitates underground transactions. It facilitates drug transactions. It facilitates terrorism, where $100 bills are passed around in suitcases and so forth. So they'd like to kill all currency. Now what are you going to do? You can't leave money in the bank because you're getting zero or negative interest rates. The bank itself where you're leaving your money is unstable, illiquid, probably even insolvent. You can't have cash because the most that they're going to have in the future are 10s and 20s. So what are you going to do? I mean, you're really trapped at this point.
So, Doug, what's the advantage of the Fed coin, if you will, from the Fed's point of view?
They can just turn off your chip and you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
You can be banned from buying plane tickets, renting a house, or getting a loan.
Oh, it's a huge advantage for them because in the 2008 crisis, they like to blame a lot of the problems on a lack of transparency. But with blockchain and the Fed coin technology, they can see everything everywhere. So it's complete transparency where they can see everything everywhere that everybody's doing. It's a parallel system relative to the one we have right now, where if anything goes wrong with the US banking system, the US insurance system, you've got the Fed coin as a backup. Fed coin gives them an extremely powerful button to control society and control its individual members. So a lot of advantages from their point of view, and no more bank runs. How can you have a bank run when there is no cash? I mean, it's diabolical in its simplicity. This is another reason why the government is going to look to put blockchain in there, because it'll be impossible to escape the tax dragnet with no cash to trade. It'll be barter or use FedCoin. And actually, is that a good thing for the economy? No, it's a bad thing for the economy because people that are dealing in what's called the underground economy are actually providing useful goods and services that if the government extracts its 30 or 40% in taxes, which they'll be able to do now with FedCoin, is going to hurt the economy, not help it. It'll help the US government, but that's different from the economy in America.
Dr. Ron Paul, the former presidential candidate and 22-year congressman, is a friend of yours, Doug, and he said that the cashless society is the IRS's dream. Total knowledge of and control over the finances of every single American. Agree?
Well, I completely agree, and Ron Paul is one of the few decent people that have actually circulated in Washington in recent decades. He's completely right. This is an extremely dangerous development for the average American.
So how is the FedCoin different than the digital money we already own in bank accounts?
Well, right now, those dollars are a liability of the bank. The FedCoin's different because it's not a liability of a commercial bank. It's a direct liability of the Federal Reserve, number one. Number two, it's going to use blockchain technology, which makes it totally trackable, unlike dollars today. So those are two huge differences.
They can just turn off your chip, and you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
It's going to be sold as a safety thing because blockchain is much harder to hack than conventional digital technology. So this is another reason why they're going to want to go in this direction. It's for your own safety.
Well, that's a pretty scary thought. With a FedCoin, you're talking about no privacy at all.
Zero.
That's scary.
Well, not only that, but as an innovation, it's much more convenient for them to create them, to debit them, and credit them. They're really going to be in control of everything at that point. At least now, your dollars are good outside the US. They're deposited in banks. You can get cash for them. If they take this to the next step during the next crisis, it's really complete control.
So the privacy out the window with FedCoin. I read that they have a way of controlling how digital currencies, where they can be spent or what they can be spent on. Is that an element of control that the feds could possibly put into this new currency?
Of course.
You can be banned from buying plane tickets, renting a house, or getting a loan.
The computer can do anything. When you take your FedCoin via your smartphone, or, and this is rather shocking, but the next step, instead of a smartphone, is everybody has a chip. And a lot of people like it. Hey, I've got a chip. I can't lose my wallet. I mean, it's all right here. I mean, your bank account, your medical records, all these things. People are chipping their dogs and their other pets today. Why not chip yourself and carry all your information and your digital money right with you? It's very convenient. It's very stupid from a personal freedom point of view. But at that point, it can be used under this scanner, can't be used under this one. It's all computerized. It's nothing. It's not a cosmic breakthrough at this point.
Well, Doug, it's not as far-fetched, I guess, as some people might believe. I think they have something going on in Japan right now for tourists and fingerprinting, fingerprints and stuff.
You're right,
something
Bob.
Like that?
Actually, reality is outrunning science fiction at this point. As of next year, tourists to Japan, when they enter the country, have to be fingerprinted and their financial data for their credit cards and so forth correlated, so that this is actually happening in Japan, so that if you're a tourist in the country, you'll also have to use your thumbprint or fingerprint when you use your credit card. So no, the next step clearly is something along these lines.
So Doug, this blockchain technology you've said is going to give the government incredible control. Can you give me an example of what you're talking about?
It's like an anti-cash. If I've got a $100 bill in my wallet or a bunch of 10s and 20s, I can spend them on anything I want, with anybody I want, and nobody knows. With blockchain, I can only spend that money to somebody else who's got a receptive smartphone or chip, and they know exactly who's getting the money and what it's being spent for. And it can be programmed so that certain transactions can't take place, or transactions with certain people or stores or whatever. So you're pretty well blocked in. I mean, for all I know, they might decide that under your Obamacare or whatever comes about after it, you're too fat. You can't buy sugar. But if you can't buy sugar, who can buy sugar? I mean, how are you going to pay the other person to buy sugar if you want sugar? You want ammunition for your gun? Well, maybe you can't buy it. How are you going to get it? How are you going to pay for it? This is a real personal freedom problem. And it's going to be sold to the American people under the guise of convenience and safety and fighting drugs and fighting theft and fighting crime and fighting terrorism and all the usual nonsense. But it's going to be devastating to freedom and economic progress in this country.
I can see how it might be sold, for example, if you limited, say, a 16-year-old's FedCoin account from buying alcohol. I mean, that could be sold as a real benefit. We can enforce the liquor laws.
Well, sure, you can disguise a lot of things as benefits. But how is a 16-year-old going to get something that he or she wants if they can't buy it? Maybe they'll have to barter. I don't know. Maybe instead of buying something, maybe they'll sell their body in order to get something, because you'll have to barter to get around using FedCoin. So there's all kinds of unintended consequences.
Well, I know with the food stamp program already, there are certain prohibited transactions. You're not allowed to buy liquor with food stamps. You're not allowed to, say, spend your electronic debit cards in strip clubs. I know that's a law in some states as well. So this just seems like a further extension of government control on individual behavior.
Absolutely. They'll be able to prohibit anything without even passing a law, quite frankly. If your FedCoin smartphone or chip isn't programmed to let you buy that, how are you going to get it? You don't have cash anymore.
Yeah, so who needs a gun registry, right?
Well, exactly. So no point in dealing with all these pesky Second Amendment laws at that point. You do an arabesque around it.
This is sounding very Orwellian, and I just wonder how, when the Fed launches this thing, how are they gonna sell this to the public? I mean, what's the pitch on this?
They'll sell it as convenience.
Okay.
It's easy. They'll sell it as security. You can't lose your wallet. Safety. They'll sell it as patriotism, helping the government get the economy back under control. And the average person basically does what he's told.
All right, so with that, let me show you the first report. This one is from Washington Post, and it's titled, "Bitcoin is Big, but FedCoin is even bigger." Now, the report goes on to detail, and I want to just highlight this one point, but it is only a matter of time before paper money is phased out, meaning that they are going to have an end to our cash, or that is the ultimate goal, is let's put an end to cash from some of the branches of the US government. Now, here's another report. This is from Fortune, and it's 5 reasons the Fed needs a Bitcoin-style currency. Now, both of these reports were put out in December 2017 or around that time, but the 5 reasons that they give is, number 1, FedCoin will be a useful tool to stimulate the economy, which is a bogus lie, because as I'm going to show you in the moment, they want to back it with the dollar 1-to-1 ratio. But the second reason is digital currency is more efficient and secure, not necessarily. Third, it would be harder for criminals to hide the money. 4, it's easier to impose negative interest rates. Doesn't that sound just wonderful? And 5, cash is going to go away anyway. Not my words. Those are the words from Fortune and the words from Washington Post. But where are they grabbing this idea? Where are they pushing this idea of FedCoin? Well, from a Yale study. Now, I'm going to throw this up on part of the screen here, and you can see FedCoin is a report, a blockchain-backed central bank cryptocurrency. Now, this report was compiled May 2017 by people there at the university, but I want to go through and highlight some areas because let's be frank, we know that the bilderbergmeetings.org, and I'm going to throw that up on the screen, that pretty much years past have proven that they want a cashless society. It's part of their agenda. But not only that, not only is Bilderberg's agenda to have this cashless society, but now they have the means to do it via a FedCoin option, whereas Bitcoin is outside of the Federal Reserve. They don't have anything to do with Bitcoin. It's people running it, and then they go through nodes or miners, if you will, who, approve or access the information or block the information. But all of that is through a separate entity and not government related. Well, they obviously want to put this under the hands of the government so they can tax us, so they can make us and force us to go cashless. All right, so back to this report from 2017, back in May. This is a study put out by Yale. And in this, they push the idea of having the Federal Reserve have a FedCoin. And again, remember, the Federal Reserve is not an American organization. It's a global bankers run by international people, has nothing to do with us here, and then they charge interest here to us here in America. But here's some highlights. They first propose that the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the US, create a blockchain-backed digital coin called FedCoin. Now, this is their starter. Again, it's blockchain-backed, similar to Bitcoin, where you have an address and everybody has a number associated with them. But in this particular one, they actually want your name, your address, and all your personal info so they can track exactly who it's to, whereas Bitcoin is tracked to just a number and not a name. All right, now it further goes on that it will be assured by the Fed, enforcing a 1-to-1 exchange rate with the dollar. So 1-to-1 ratio, we're talking between FedCoin and the dollar. It also says that a successful FedCoin would make banknotes, credit card companies, and Bitcoin obsolete, gone, sayonara, including cash, credit cards, and Bitcoin. Nothing but FedCoin. Imagine the amount of control that the Federal Reserve could have over the American people when everything else is gone. Something to think about. But it says about transforming the nation's medium for money. So obviously they want to transform us into their global dictating system, kind of like what the Antichrist is going to do in the latter days. We know that they have a system which nobody cannot buy, sell, or trade without the mark of the beast. Could something like FedCoin be used as that? Absolutely, especially if it is backed by the Feds. And I personally like Bitcoin for the reason that it's not backed by the Federal Reserve, but here they are wanting to create their own. Now, if you skip a couple of pages onto page 6, what I want to show you there is that what they really want to do with FedCoin is make it global. Now, a little further down on that page, it says transparency about cash flows would offer the Fed and the world, meaning they don't want to just keep it here in America, but they want to make it global, the most ripe data set for analysis ever seen. So obviously they want to take this outside the bounds of the good old-fashioned USA. Furthermore, on page 7, they say a central bank cryptocurrency, FedCoin, will be a universal electronic 24/7 liability to the Fed's balance sheet. Even more power to the Fed, if you will. On page 8, it talks about this hybrid model where the central bank primarily controls the money supply. So who's in charge of our money supply? 100%, no more cash transactions that cannot be traced. Well, the Federal Reserve, of course. And then they go on to say the reasons why FedCoin is so good, which is just a load of crap, to be honest. Its FedCoin will offer speed, stability, scalability, and security, and demonstrate this technological potential to be the country's financial backbone. And then it even gives reasons why, but don't believe any of those reasons because they're just a load of junk there, if you will. All right, moving on a couple of pages down the report, there's a few other things that I want to show you. But on page 14 of this document, it goes on to talk about decentralization. It says, unlike the distribution set of Bitcoin nodes, FedCoin nodes, those who are kind of like your miners, your workers behind FedCoin, will be a decentralized group. Okay, keyword decentralized, but I'm guessing it's not really decentralized. Group of trusted institutions selected by the central bank. In other words, with Bitcoin, we have miners, we have nodes or whatever, where these are people who are paid money to traffic and kind of approve transactions and all of that. Well, in this FedCoin system, it will be only people who are selected by the Federal Reserve that will be able to do that. In other words, it's completely controlled by the Fed. Even the nodes, even the miners are controlled by the Fed. How on earth is that considered decentralized? I'm not quite sure yet. But according to the report, that's what they're calling it. And I just don't see it that way. But this is completely and utterly something that could definitely lead to something in the latter times spoken of in biblical prophecy. One other thing, or the last thing that I wanted to show you on this report is on page 17, and that is this, that they admit that the government will use things like FedCoin to completely surveillance and track your every move. It says, up at the top there, it says federal cryptocurrencies represent a possible means of undermining the development of distribution cryptocurrencies while introducing a form of money transfer over which governments might, may I say, will assert unprecedented levels of surveillance and control. Unprecedented levels of surveillance and control. They're already doing that via the NSA on our internet. Imagine if we give them the power over our money, like something like FedCoin. You're telling me that they might do it? No. Yale University, they will. We, the American people, know they will, and it will be corruption on an extreme level. Imagine if you tick somebody off at the IRS, what they're going to do to your bank account or what they're going to do to your finances. You can kiss it all goodbye and forget the cash option altogether. That is the reason they want FedCoin, for complete and absolute control over you, for complete and absolute control. You can't even have, if you don't have a cashless society, imagine having your child go out there and running a lemonade stand. Well, where did that money come from, says the Federal Reserve? Was it taxed on something as simple as a lemonade stand? These are things that we really need to think about. Now, I know I said one last thing I wanted to mention in it. I guess one more last thing is on page 18, and this is just really in your face, but they admit it. It says, Bitcoin challenges the sovereign state, so our implementation of FedCoin sought to design a system with law enforcement in mind. Law enforcement in mind, meaning that obviously this is a policed-styled system. And who's it policed by? Well, the feds, the Fed nodes, and the little ones that the Fed hired to do so. Now, there's a lot more information in this report. It's only 33 pages. I encourage you to read through it if you can. I've kind of highlighted the important stuff. Some of the things that I left out that are in this document are the fact that it will give substantial control over to the federal government, and it's written multiple times. I could have shown you like 10 different areas, but the goal of this is to be able to track and surveillance everything so everything can be taxed and moved.
They can just turn off your chip and you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.